The private jet was heading straight for the penthouse. Rebecca Martinez dropped her vacuum cleaner and stared in horror through the floor-to-ceiling windows as the sleek Gulfstream G650 descended at an impossible angle, black smoke trailing from its left engine. The aircraft was coming in way too fast, way too low, and directly toward the 60th floor terrace where she was cleaning. "Maurice, get inside now!" she screamed at the 7-year-old boy who was flying paper airplanes from the outdoor terrace, completely oblivious to the chaos above. The child's blonde hair caught the afternoon sun as he looked up, confused. "But Bika, I'm winning! My plane went the furthest!" There was no time to explain. The jet's landing gear scraped against the neighboring building, sending sparks flying. Rebecca sprinted across the marble floor, her worn sneakers sliding on the polished surface. She burst through the terrace doors just as the pilot managed to pull up at the last second. But it was too late. The jet's wing clipped the edge of the infinity pool, sending a massive wave of water cascading toward them. Rebecca dove, wrapping her arms around Maurice and rolling them both behind the outdoor kitchen's granite counter. Whoosh! 10,000 gallons of chlorinated water crashed over them like a tsunami. Pool chairs, umbrellas, and Maurice's paper airplanes went flying in every direction. The jet's engine roared overhead as it struggled to gain altitude, disappearing into the Manhattan skyline. "Are you okay, buddy?" Rebecca gasped, checking Maurice for injuries. Her uniform was soaked, her dark hair plastered to her face. Maurice blinked up at her with those impossibly green eyes. "That was awesome. Did you see how fast we rolled? Just like in the movies." "Maurice, that was dangerous." "Maurice!" The voice cut through the air like a blade. Rebecca turned to see James Wellington III standing in the doorway, his usually perfect charcoal suit somehow still immaculate despite the chaos. His steel-gray eyes swept over the destruction before landing on his son. For a split second, Rebecca saw something she'd never witnessed in 6 months of cleaning his penthouse. Pure, raw fear flickering across the face of New York's most powerful CEO. "Dad!" Maurice scrambled to his feet, water dripping from his clothes. "Did you see? A plane almost landed on us, but Bika saved me. She's like a superhero." James's gaze shifted to Rebecca, who was still kneeling on the wet terrace, suddenly very aware of how she must look. Her cleaning uniform clung to her small frame, and she could feel a cut on her cheek where debris had grazed her. "Are you hurt?" His voice was carefully controlled, but she caught the slight tremor underneath. "I'm fine, Mr. Wellington. Just a scratch." She stood up, wringing water from her ponytail. Maurice is completely unharmed. James knelt beside his son, his hands gently checking for injuries with the precision of someone who'd clearly done this before. "What were you doing out here? I told you to stay inside while Ms. Martinez was working." "I was testing my new paper airplane design," Maurice said proudly. "It's aerodynamically superior to yesterday's model." Despite everything, Rebecca found herself fighting back a smile. The kid was 7 years old and talking like a tiny engineer. She'd noticed his unusual intelligence during her months of cleaning around him, but he never failed to amaze her. "Mr. Wellington," she said, suddenly remembering the chaos around them. "Should we call someone? About the plane, I mean. And your pool is—" James stood, finally taking in the destruction. The infinity pool was completely drained, expensive outdoor furniture scattered like toys. The custom Italian tiles were cracked from the impact. "I'll handle it," he said tersely, already pulling out his phone. "Henderson will have a crew here within the hour." "Of course he will," Rebecca muttered under her breath, then immediately regretted it. James paused, his fingers hovering over his phone. "Excuse me?" "Nothing, sir. I should get back to—" "Dad, can Bika stay for dinner?" Maurice interrupted, tugging on his father's wet pant leg. "She saved my life. That's what heroes do in movies, right? They get invited to dinner?" An uncomfortable silence stretched between them. James Wellington III, the man who'd been on the cover of Forbes 12 times, looked completely out of his depth. Rebecca had never seen him interact with Maurice for more than a few minutes at a time, and certainly never in a situation like this. "I'm sure Ms. Martinez has other obligations," James said finally. "Actually," Rebecca found herself saying, I was just going to heat up leftover ramen in my studio apartment. So no other obligations. Maurice clapped his hands together. Perfect. Dad, you always say we should be grateful to people who help us. And Becca helped a lot. James's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Rebecca realized she'd just put one of the most powerful men in America in an impossible position. He couldn't say no to his son's request without looking like a complete jerk, but having dinner with the help was clearly not part of his usual routine. I suppose that would be appropriate, he said stiffly, to express our gratitude. Yay. Maurice jumped up and down, sending water droplets everywhere. Can we order pizza? Real pizza, not that weird stuff with the tiny vegetables. Maurice, we don't order pizza, James said automatically. Why not? Rebecca asked, genuinely curious. Pizza is basically a perfect food. You've got your grains, dairy, vegetables, protein. James stared at her, as if she'd suggested they eat dirt. I have a private chef. Who makes tiny vegetables? Maurice added sadly. This time Rebecca couldn't stop herself from laughing. The sound seemed to startle James, who was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Well, she said, wringing out her shirt one more time. I guess this is going to be interesting. Through the chaos, the soaked terrace, and the awkward tension, none of them noticed that Morris was grinning from ear to ear. For the first time in months, his dad and his favorite person in the world were going to have dinner together. And if Morris Wellington was anything like his father, he was very, very good at getting what he wanted. 2 hours later, Rebecca stood in front of James Wellington's private elevator, questioning every life decision that had led her to this moment. She'd managed to find a clean pair of jeans and her least faded t-shirt, but she still felt like she was about to infiltrate a foreign country. The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse living room, where she found Maurice building what appeared to be a fort out of designer throw pillows. Becca! He jumped up, scattering Italian silk cushions everywhere. You came. Dad said you might not show up. Did he now? Rebecca raised an eyebrow, looking around for James. The living room was the size of her entire apartment building, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Central Park. He's in his office, Maurice said, reading her expression. He's been on the phone for like forever. Something about insurance and lawsuits and other boring grown-up stuff. Probably because a plane almost crashed into his pool, Rebecca pointed out. Yeah, but that was the fun part. Maurice grinned. The boring part is all the talking afterward. James emerged from a hallway, now dressed in casual clothes that probably cost more than Rebecca's monthly rent. Even his relaxed look was intimidating. Perfectly fitted dark jeans and a button-down shirt that had definitely never seen the inside of a regular department store. Ms. Martinez, I wasn't sure you'd actually come. I keep my promises, she said simply, especially to 7-year-old heroes who survived plane crashes. It wasn't technically a crash, James corrected. More of a controlled emergency landing. Dad, you weren't even here, Maurice protested. How do you know? Becca and I were in the danger zone. The danger zone? James's eyebrow quirked slightly. Yeah, like in Top Gun. Becca said we were like fighter pilots diving for cover. James shot Rebecca a look that clearly said, What exactly are you teaching my son? I may have used some creative metaphors to keep him calm, she admitted. Before James could respond, a woman in a crisp white uniform appeared from what Rebecca assumed was the kitchen. Mr. Wellington, dinner is ready to be served, she announced with a slight French accent. Thank you, Margot. James turned to his guests. Shall we? The dining room was even more intimidating than the living room. The table could easily seat 20 people, and it was set with more forks than Rebecca had ever seen in one place. Crystal glasses caught the light from an enormous chandelier, and she was pretty sure the china was worth more than her car. This is where you eat every night? She asked Maurice as they sat down. Usually just me and Dad sit at that end. Maurice pointed to 2 place settings that looked lonely at the massive table's head. But tonight Margot put us all together. It's like a real family dinner. The innocent comment hung in the air like a challenge. James cleared his throat uncomfortably, while Rebecca pretended to study her napkin. Margot began serving the first course, something that looked like art on a plate. Rebecca couldn't identify half the ingredients, but she was pretty sure there were flowers involved. "So," James said, clearly searching for safe conversation, "Maurice tells me you've been working here for 6 months." 7 months next week, Rebecca corrected, taking a careful bite of whatever was on her plate. It actually tasted better than it looked. "And before that?" "I worked at a hotel in Queens, housekeeping." She met his eyes directly. "I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I go to college, get a real job, climb the corporate ladder?" James shifted uncomfortably. "I wasn't thinking that." "Yes, you were. It's okay. Everyone thinks that." Rebecca shrugged. "I was supposed to go to college. Had a scholarship and everything, but my mom got sick and someone had to take care of her and pay the bills. So I took care of her and paid the bills." "What happened to your mother?" James asked quietly. "She died 2 years ago. Cancer." Rebecca's voice was matter-of-fact, but Maurice reached over and patted her hand sympathetically. "I'm sorry," James said. And for the first time since she'd known him, he sounded genuinely human. "Me too," Maurice added solemnly. "My mom died too, but I was really little, so I don't remember much." Another uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Rebecca realized she'd stumbled into family territory she knew nothing about. "Well," she said brightly, "this is officially the most depressing dinner conversation ever. Maurice, tell your dad about your airplane designs." Maurice's face lit up immediately. "Oh, Dad, you have to see this. I've been working on improving the wing-to-body ratio for optimal flight distance." James blinked. "You've been working on what?" "Becca's been teaching me about aerodynamics during lunch breaks," Maurice explained excitedly. "Did you know that the Wright brothers weren't actually the first people to fly? They were just the first to fly successfully in a controlled, sustained manner." "I did not know that," James said slowly, looking between his son and Rebecca. "Becca knows lots of stuff," Maurice continued. "She reads all the time. She's like a walking library." "I just read whatever books people leave behind in the hotel rooms," Rebecca said, embarrassed by the attention. "You'd be surprised what people abandon. Engineering textbooks, history books, romance novels." "Romance novels?" James asked with what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Research," Rebecca said defensively. "I'm studying the human condition." "The human condition?" James repeated. "Yeah, you know, what makes people tick? What makes them fall in love? What makes them happy? What makes them—" She gestured vaguely at him. "Not smile for 6 months straight." Maurice giggled. "Dad never smiles. I think he forgot how." "I smile," James protested. "When?" Maurice challenged. James opened his mouth, then closed it. "I smile internally." "That doesn't count," Rebecca and Maurice said in unison, then looked at each other and burst into laughter. James stared at them, and for just a moment Rebecca caught something in his expression that looked almost wistful. "You know what this fancy dinner is missing?" Rebecca asked suddenly. "What?" James asked cautiously. "Fun." She turned to Maurice. "What's your favorite game?" "Hide and seek." "Perfect, James, you're it." "I'm what?" "You're it. In hide and seek, you count to 30, we hide, you find us." James looked horrified. "I don't play games." "Dad, please?" Maurice's eyes went wide with hope. "We never play games." "I don't think that's appropriate." "Why not?" Rebecca challenged. "Because I'm the help? Because this is your fancy penthouse? Because you're too important to play with your son?" The words came out harsher than she'd intended, but she didn't take them back. James's face went cold. "You don't know anything about my relationship with my son. I know he builds pillow forts alone and talks to the housekeeping staff because he's lonely," Rebecca shot back. "I know he's brilliant and funny and sweet, and you're so busy being the important CEO that you're missing it all." "Becca," Maurice said quietly, sensing the tension. James stood up abruptly. "I think this dinner is over." "Dad, no." Maurice jumped up too. "Please don't make her leave, she's my friend." "Maurice, go to your room. Now! Maurice looked between his father and Rebecca, his eyes filling with tears. I hate it when you use your mean voice. He ran from the room, leaving James and Rebecca staring at each other across the elegant table. You had no right, James said quietly. You're right, Rebecca admitted. I'm sorry. I overstepped. You don't understand the situation. Then explain it to me. James was quiet for a long moment, running his hands through his hair. His mother died in a car accident when he was 3. I was driving. The words hit Rebecca like a physical blow. Oh my God. James, I'm so sorry. I walked away without a scratch. She didn't. His voice was hollow. Maurice was in the back seat. He was unconscious for 2 days. The doctor said he might have brain damage, but he was fine. Physically anyway. That's why you don't smile, Rebecca said quietly. You think you don't deserve to be happy? I don't. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. James looked up, surprised by her bluntness. Your wife died in an accident, Rebecca continued. A terrible, tragic accident. But Maurice didn't. He's here, he's healthy, he's amazing. And instead of celebrating that miracle, you're punishing both of you. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. Rebecca stood up. I understand that you're so busy feeling guilty about being alive that you forgot how to live. And Maurice is paying the price. She headed for the elevator, then turned back. For what it's worth, I think your wife would want you to be happy. I think she'd want you to play games with your son and smile at his jokes and be proud of how incredible he is. But what do I know? I'm just the help. The elevator doors closed behind her, leaving James alone with his guilt, his empty penthouse, and the sound of his son crying in the next room. Upstairs, Maurice sat on his bed, tears streaming down his face. He'd heard every word through the intercom system he'd accidentally discovered last month. His dad was sad because of the car accident. Becca was sad because she had to leave. And he was sad because the 2 people he cared about most in the world couldn't see what he saw so clearly. They needed each other. And Maurice Wellington, 7-year-old genius, was going to make sure they figured it out. 3 days later, Rebecca was scrubbing the marble floors of the penthouse when she heard it, a sound that made her freeze mid-swipe. Maurice was crying. Not the dramatic wailing of a tantrum, but the quiet, heartbroken sobs of a child who thinks no one cares enough to listen. She followed the sound to his bedroom, where she found him curled up on his bed, clutching a photograph. Hey, buddy, she said softly, sitting on the edge of his bed. What's wrong? Maurice looked up with red, puffy eyes. I made Dad angry again. What happened? I asked him to come to my school's science fair next Friday. He said he couldn't because he has meetings. Maurice's voice cracked. He always has meetings. Rebecca's heart ached for him. I'm sure he wants to be there. No, he doesn't. Maurice held up the photograph. It showed a beautiful woman with blonde hair and green eyes, clearly his mother, holding a baby Maurice at what looked like a park. Mom used to come to everything. She said I was the most important thing in her whole world. You still are, Rebecca said gently. Your dad he's forgotten how to show it. Will you come? Maurice asked suddenly. To my science fair? Rebecca blinked. Maurice, I'm not family. You're my friend. That's better than family sometimes. He looked at her with those impossibly green eyes. Please? I'm presenting my paper airplane research, the stuff you helped me with. How could she say no to that face? Of course I'll come. For the first time in days, Maurice smiled. Really? Really. But you have to promise me you'll give your dad another chance. Sometimes adults need extra time to figure things out. Maurice nodded eagerly, then paused. Becca, are you still mad at Dad? I was never mad at him, sweetheart. I was sad for him. There's a difference. What's the difference? Rebecca thought for a moment. When you're mad at someone, you want them to feel bad. When you're sad for someone, you want them to feel better. Do you want Dad to feel better? Yes, very much. Maurice grinned, the kind of grin that meant he was plotting something. Good. Because I have a plan. The next morning, James was reviewing quarterly reports when his assistant knocked on his office door. "Mr. Wellington, there's a problem with Maurice." James's blood ran cold. "What kind of problem?" "The school called. He's locked himself in the supply closet and won't come out. He's asking for..." She consulted her notes. "Someone named Bika?" 20 minutes later, James was standing outside PS 124's supply closet with the principal, a frazzled teacher, and Rebecca, who looked as confused as he felt. "Maurice?" Rebecca knocked gently on the door. "It's me. What's going on?" "I'm not coming out until Dad says he's sorry," came the muffled reply. "Sorry for what?" James asked, completely bewildered. "For missing my presentation practice yesterday, and for not listening when I told you about my airplane project, and for being sad all the time." James ran his hands through his hair. "Maurice, you can't just lock yourself in a closet because you're upset." "Why not? You lock yourself in your office when you're upset." Rebecca bit back a smile. The kid had a point. "Maurice," she said, "this isn't solving anything. Come out so we can talk about it. Only if Dad promises to try harder." James looked helplessly at Rebecca. "What am I supposed to say to that?" "The truth," she said simply. James took a deep breath. "Maurice, I know I haven't been the best father lately. I know I miss things and I know I don't always listen the way I should. But I'm trying to protect you." "From what?" From me. From getting hurt again." The closet was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Dad, are you crying?" James wiped his eyes quickly. "No. It's okay if you are. I cry sometimes too. Becca says it's healthy." "Does she now?" James glanced at Rebecca, who shrugged innocently. "She says lots of smart things, like how you can't protect someone by staying away from them. You can only protect them by staying close." The closet door opened slowly, and Maurice peeked out. His hair was dusty, and his school uniform wrinkled, but he looked determined. "I want you to come to my science fair," he said to his father. "Not because you have to, but because you want to. And I want you to meet my friends and see my project and be proud of me." James knelt down to Maurice's level. "I am proud of you, every single day." "Then show me." James looked at his son, really looked at him, and for the first time in years, he saw not a reminder of his failure, but a miracle. This brilliant, brave, beautiful boy, who somehow still wanted his father's love despite everything. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll be there." Maurice threw his arms around James's neck. "Promise?" "Promise." "Pinky promise?" James actually smiled. A real smile. "Pinky promise." As they walked out of the school together, Maurice between them chattering excitedly about his science fair project, James found himself stealing glances at Rebecca. She was laughing at something Maurice said, her whole face lighting up with genuine joy. "Thank you," he said quietly when Maurice ran ahead to get his backpack. "For what?" "For caring about him. For understanding him better than I do." "You understand him fine," Rebecca said. "You're just scared." "But James, he's not going anywhere. He's your son and he adores you. Nothing's going to change that." "How do you know?" "Because I lost my mom, remember? And if I could have just one more day with her, I'd take it no matter what. Maurice gets to have every day with you, don't waste them." James stopped walking. "You're remarkable, you know that?" Rebecca felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I'm just a housekeeper who reads too much." "No," James said seriously. "You're the woman who saved my son's life, and maybe mine too." Before Rebecca could respond, Maurice came running back, backpack flying behind him. "Dad, Becca, want to come get ice cream? There's a place that has 37 flavors." James looked at his watch automatically, then caught himself. "Actually, that sounds perfect." "Really?" Maurice's eyes went wide. "Really, but only if Ms. Martinez joins us." "Becca, say yes." Maurice grabbed her hand. "Please?" Looking at the two of them, James with his tentative smile and Maurice with his hopeful eyes, Rebecca felt something shift in her chest. something warm and terrifying and wonderful. "Okay," she said, "but I'm getting the biggest sundae they have." "Deal!" Maurice cheered, grabbing both their hands and pulling them toward the ice cream shop. As they walked down the street together, James realized something had changed. For the first time since the accident, he wasn't thinking about what he'd lost. He was thinking about what he still had. And maybe, just maybe, what he might gain. That evening, after Morris had fallen asleep with a stomach full of ice cream and stories about his favorite teacher, James found himself standing in his empty living room staring out at the city lights. The penthouse felt different somehow, less like a museum and more like a home. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Thank you for today." Maurice was so happy. "Sleep well. R." James stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Thank you for showing me how to be a father again. J. You never stopped being one. You just forgot for a while. It happens. Does it get easier?" "Yes, but not alone." James read the message 3 times before he understood what she was really saying. And for the first time in 4 years, he fell asleep with a smile on his face. In her tiny studio apartment across town, Rebecca was having her own revelation. She'd spent so long taking care of everyone else, her mother, her clients, Maurice, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to be cared for in return. But today, when James had looked at her like she was something precious, she'd remembered. And it scared her almost as much as it thrilled her. The science fair was a disaster. Not Morris's presentation. That was perfect. He'd explained his aerodynamic theories with the confidence of a tiny professor, complete with charts and a working model that flew twice as far as any other paper airplane in the competition. James had never been more proud. The disaster was everything else. "Is that your nanny?" asked Mrs. Henderson, the mother of Morris's classmate, eyeing Rebecca with barely concealed disdain. "She's very young." "She's not my nanny," James replied stiffly. "She's a friend of the family." "Oh, Mrs. Henderson's smile turned predatory. "I see. Well, if you ever need recommendations for proper childcare, I know several excellent agencies. You really can't be too careful about who you allow around your son." James felt his jaw clench, but before he could respond, Rebecca appeared at his elbow. "Everything okay?" she asked, though her eyes were already reading the situation. "Mrs. Henderson was just offering childcare advice," James said carefully. "How thoughtful," Rebecca replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Though I should mention that Morris isn't lacking in care. He's probably one of the most loved children I've ever met." Mrs. Henderson's eyebrows rose. "And you would know this how?" "Because I pay attention to him. I listen when he talks about his interests. I celebrate his achievements, and I'm here supporting him today. Isn't that what matters?" The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. James found himself stepping slightly closer to Rebecca, a protective instinct he hadn't felt in years. "Ladies," he said smoothly, "I think Maurice is about to announce the winners." As Mrs. Henderson moved away with a sniff, Rebecca let out a shaky breath. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I shouldn't have said anything." "Why are you apologizing?" She was being rude. "Because she's right." Rebecca's voice was quiet but firm. "I don't belong here, James. Look around. I'm the only person in this room who didn't drive here in a car worth more than my annual salary." James looked around the gymnasium, seeing it through her eyes for the first time. Designer handbags, expensive jewelry, conversations about vacation homes in the Hamptons. He'd never noticed the invisible barriers before. "That doesn't matter," he said. "It does to them, and eventually, it'll matter to you too." Before James could argue, Maurice came running over, his face glowing with excitement. "Dad! Bika! I won 3rd place!" He held up a bronze medal. "And the judges said my research was exceptionally thorough for someone my age." "That's amazing, sweetheart." Rebecca hugged him tightly. "I'm so proud of you." "We both are," James added, ruffling Maurice's hair. "This calls for a celebration dinner." "Can we go to Tony's?" Maurice asked hopefully. They have the best pizza in the city. James started to automatically suggest somewhere more upscale, then caught himself. Tony's sounds perfect. Tony's Pizzeria was everything James's usual restaurants weren't. Loud, crowded, and absolutely authentic. The tables were covered in red checkered plastic, the walls were covered in photos of satisfied customers, and the air was thick with the smell of garlic and melted cheese. "This is my kind of place," Rebecca said, sliding into a booth that had definitely seen better days. "Really?" James asked, looking around nervously. "It's so casual." "That's the point. Look at Maurice." James followed her gaze to see his son chatting animatedly with the teenage waitress, showing her his medal and explaining his project. The girl was listening with genuine interest, occasionally asking questions that made Maurice beam with pride. "He's comfortable here," Rebecca continued. "He's not worried about using the wrong fork or speaking too loudly. He's just being a kid." "I never thought about it that way." "That's because you've never been poor." Rebecca's voice wasn't accusatory, just matter of fact. "You've never had to worry about fitting in with people who have more than you do. You've never felt out of place in your own life." James was quiet for a moment, processing this. "Is that how you felt today? Out of place?" "A little. But then I remembered why I was there, for Maurice. And that made it worth it." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of their pizza, a massive, gloriously messy creation that required 2 hands and 0 dignity to eat properly. "This is incredible," James said after his first bite, sauce dripping down his chin. "Dad, you have pizza on your face," Maurice giggled. "So do you," James laughed, reaching over to wipe sauce from his son's nose. Rebecca watched them together, her heart doing complicated things in her chest. This was what she'd wanted for them, this easy, natural connection. But seeing it made her realize something else. She was falling in love with both of them, and that was a problem. "Becca, you're being quiet," Maurice observed. "Are you okay?" "Just thinking," she said, forcing a smile. "About what?" "About how lucky I am to be here with you two." James looked at her across the table, and for a moment the crowded restaurant faded away. There was something in his eyes, warm, intense, and completely focused on her. "We're the lucky ones," he said quietly. The moment was broken by Maurice's excited gasp. "Oh, there's someone I want you to meet." A woman in her 50s approached their table, wearing an apron and a warm smile. "Maurice, how did the science fair go?" "Mrs. Rossi, I won 3rd place." Maurice held up his medal proudly. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you." She turned to James and Rebecca. "You must be Maurice's parents. I'm Elena Rossi. I own this place. Maurice comes in sometimes with his... Well, I wasn't sure who brings him." "I do," Rebecca said quickly. "I'm Rebecca Martinez. I take care of Maurice sometimes." "And I'm James Wellington, Maurice's father." Elena's eyes widened slightly at the name. Clearly, she recognized it from the business pages, but her smile never wavered. "Well, any family of Maurice's is family here. This pizza is on the house. Consider it a celebration of our young scientist." As Elena walked away, James felt a strange warmth in his chest. When was the last time someone had called him part of a family? When was the last time he'd felt like he belonged somewhere? "She's nice," Rebecca said. "She assumed we were together," James said quietly. "Did you notice?" "I noticed." Rebecca's cheeks were pink. "I should probably correct that assumption." "Should you?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility and danger in equal measure. "James," Rebecca started, but she was interrupted by his phone buzzing. He glanced at the screen and his face immediately changed. "I have to take this. It's about the merger." "The merger can wait," Rebecca said. "We're having dinner." "It's a $12 billion deal, Rebecca. It can't wait." The coldness in his voice was like a slap. In an instant, he'd gone from the warm, laughing man sharing pizza with his son to the intimidating CEO she'd first met. "Of course," she said quietly. "Business first." James was already standing, phone pressed to his ear. "Henderson, what's the situation? I told you I didn't want to be disturbed unless—" "What? No, that's unacceptable. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up and looked at Maurice, who was staring at him with disappointed eyes. "I'm sorry, buddy. I have to go to the office." "But we're celebrating," Maurice said, his voice small. "I know. We'll celebrate more tomorrow, okay? Rebecca can take you home." "I don't want Rebecca to take me home. I want you to take me home." James crouched down to Maurice's level. Sometimes grown-ups have to do things they don't want to do. This is one of those times. Like how you didn't want to come to my science fair. The words hit James like a physical blow. "Maurice, that's not—" "I did want to come. But you want to work more." James looked helplessly at Rebecca, who was watching the exchange with something that looked like pity. "Go," she said quietly. "I'll take care of him." "Rebecca, just go, James. Your billion-dollar deal is waiting." James left money on the table and walked out of the restaurant, his phone already ringing again. He didn't see Maurice's tears or Rebecca's disappointed shake of her head. Outside, sitting in his car, James stared back at the warm, glowing restaurant windows. Through the glass, he could see Rebecca comforting Morris, probably explaining why his father had to leave, making excuses that James didn't deserve. His phone buzzed with a text from his assistant. "False alarm on the merger. Turns out it was just a paperwork delay. Nothing urgent. See you Monday." James closed his eyes and let his head fall back against the headrest. He'd done it again. He'd chosen work over his son, fear over love, isolation over connection. And this time, he'd hurt Rebecca too. Back in the restaurant, Rebecca was helping Maurice finish his pizza, both of them quieter now. "Is Dad ever going to choose us over work?" Maurice asked. The question broke Rebecca's heart because she wasn't sure she knew the answer. "I think he wants to," she said carefully. "But sometimes people get scared of the things they want most." "Are you scared too?" Rebecca looked at this sweet, perceptive boy who'd somehow become one of the most important people in her life. "Yeah," she admitted. "I am." "Of what?" "Of wanting something I can't have." Maurice was quiet for a moment, then reached across the table and took her hand. "Maybe you can have it," he said seriously. "Maybe you just have to be brave enough to try." As they walked home together, Rebecca realized that a 7-year-old had just given her the best advice she'd ever received. The question was, did she have the courage to take it? The photograph changed everything. It was Monday morning, and Rebecca was dusting James's home office when she saw it on the front page of the New York Social Register that had been delivered with his morning papers. The headline read, "Wellington Air finds new friend, billionaire CEO spotted with mysterious brunette." The photo showed James, Maurice, and her leaving Tony's Pizzeria 3 nights ago. But the photographer had captured the moment when James was helping her into his car, his hand on her back, both of them smiling. Out of context, it looked intimate, romantic, like something it wasn't, or maybe like something it was trying to be. The article was worse than the headline. Sources close to the Wellington family express concern over James Wellington III's recent choice of companion. The woman, identified as Rebecca Martinez, 26, is reportedly employed as domestic help in the Wellington penthouse. Questions arise about the appropriateness of the relationship and its potential impact on 7-year-old Maurice Wellington, who has already endured significant trauma. Rebecca's hands were shaking as she read it. They'd made her sound like a gold digger, a predator, a threat to Maurice's well-being. Everything she'd been afraid people would think about her. "Ms. Martinez?" She spun around to find James standing in the doorway, his face unreadable. He was holding his own copy of the paper. "I can explain," she started, but he held up a hand. "We need to talk." They sat in his living room, the newspaper spread between them like evidence at a trial. James was in full CEO mode, distant, controlled, intimidating. "How long have you known about this?" he asked. "Known about what?" "Don't play dumb. Someone tipped off the press, someone who knew our schedule, knew where we'd be." Rebecca stared at him. You think I called the paparazzi? I think you're smart enough to know that a relationship with me would be financially advantageous. The words hit her like a physical slap. A relationship? Is that what you think this is? I think you're a young woman who's been taking care of other people your whole life, and you saw an opportunity. Rebecca stood up, her heart pounding with hurt and rage. You bastard. Excuse me? You heard me. You're a coward and a bastard. Her voice was shaking with emotion. You were starting to feel something real, something that scared you, so you're looking for any excuse to run away. That's not... Yes, it is. She threw the newspaper at him. You think I want this? You think I want to be splashed across the society pages as the help who got above her station? You think I enjoy being judged by people who don't even know me? James's mask slipped slightly. Rebecca, I have spent 6 months watching you struggle to connect with the most amazing kid in the world. I have listened to you blame yourself for things that weren't your fault. I have seen you smile for the first time in years, and I have fallen in love with both of you despite knowing exactly how this would end. You've what? I'm in love with you, James. I'm in love with your son. I'm in love with the family we could be. And that terrifies me more than any newspaper article ever could. James stood up slowly, his face pale. You can't be. Why not? Because I'll hurt you. I hurt everyone I care about. My wife, my son, and now you. So you're going to hurt me first before I can hurt you? I'm trying to protect you. From what? From being happy? From being loved? From having a family? From me, James exploded. From this world. Do you know what they'll do to you if this continues? They'll tear you apart. They'll investigate your entire life, your family, your friends. They'll make you out to be a villain or a victim, and either way, you'll never have a normal life again. And what about Maurice? What happens to him when you push away everyone who cares about him? James's jaw clenched. Maurice will be fine. He's resilient. No, he won't. He'll grow up thinking love is conditional, that people leave when things get hard, that he's not worth fighting for. That's not true. It's exactly true. You're about to prove it to him. Before James could respond, they heard a small voice from the hallway. Becca, are you leaving? They turned to see Maurice standing in the doorway, still in his pajamas, clutching the stuffed airplane she'd given him for his birthday. His eyes were red with tears. I heard you fighting, he said quietly. Are you going away like Mom did? Rebecca's heart shattered. She knelt down to his level, fighting back her own tears. Oh, sweetheart, no. I'm not going anywhere like your mom did. Your mom didn't choose to leave you. But you are choosing to leave me. Rebecca looked at James, who was standing frozen, watching his son's heart break in real time. It's complicated, Maurice. No, it's not. Maurice's voice was stronger now, angry. You love us and we love you. That's not complicated. That's simple. Maurice, James said quietly, go to your room. No. Excuse me? I said no. Maurice crossed his arms, looking exactly like his father when he was being stubborn. I'm tired of adults making decisions about my life without asking me what I want. You're 7 years old, so I'm smart. I know what's happening. You're scared because you think you'll lose Becca like you lost Mom. But guess what, Dad? You're losing her anyway. And you're losing her on purpose. The words hung in the air like an accusation. James looked at his son, then at Rebecca, then at the newspaper that had started it all. This is exactly what I was afraid of, he said quietly. You're already in the middle of it. Both of you. Then fight for us, Rebecca said desperately. Fight for your family. I can't. You won't. James turned away, unable to look at either of them. I think it's best if you don't work here anymore. The silence was deafening. Rebecca stood up slowly, her legs shaking. Fine, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I want you to know that you're making the biggest mistake of your life. She walked to the door, then turned back one last time. And Maurice? None of this is your fault. Your dad loves you more than anything in the world. He's just forgotten how to show it. She left without looking back. but she heard Maurice's sobs echoing through the penthouse. That afternoon, James sat in his office staring out at the city below. The merger he'd abandoned dinner for had fallen through anyway. The urgent call that had pulled him away from his son had been about nothing. His assistant knocked and entered. "Mr. Wellington? There's a call for you. It's Maurice's school." James's blood ran cold. "Put them through." "Mr. Wellington, this is Principal Sanders. I'm calling because Maurice hasn't spoken a word since he arrived this morning. He's not participating in class, not eating lunch, not responding to anyone. We're concerned. I'll be right there." James found Maurice sitting alone in the corner of his classroom, staring out the window. When he saw his father, his eyes filled with tears, but he didn't move. "Hey, buddy," James said softly, sitting beside him. "Want to tell me what's wrong?" Maurice was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Is Bika really not coming back?" James felt his heart break. "No, she's not coming back." "Because of the newspaper?" "Because it's complicated." "You keep saying that, but it's not complicated. You're just scared." James looked at his son, really looked at him, and saw a wisdom that shouldn't exist in a 7-year-old's eyes. "You're right," he admitted. "I am scared." "Of what?" "Of losing you. Of losing her. Of not being enough." Maurice crawled into his father's lap, something he hadn't done in months. "Dad, do you remember what you told me after Mom died? You said that loving someone means being brave enough to risk getting hurt." James closed his eyes. He'd forgotten he'd said that. "You said that even if it hurts, love is always worth it. Because without love, we're just existing." "I did say that. So why aren't you being brave now?" James held his son tighter, finally understanding what Rebecca had been trying to tell him. He'd been so focused on protecting Maurice from pain that he'd forgotten to protect him from emptiness. "Because I'm an idiot," he said quietly. "Yeah," Maurice agreed. "But you're my idiot. And Becca loves idiots. She told me so." Despite everything, James smiled. "She did not say that." "She did. She said that loving someone means loving all of them, even the parts that are scared or broken or stubborn. She's pretty smart, isn't she? The smartest. So are you going to fix this?" James looked at his son's hopeful face and made a decision that terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. "Yeah, I'm going to fix this." "Promise?" "Pinky promise." As they walked out of the school together, James was already forming a plan. He'd spent years building walls to protect himself from getting hurt. Tomorrow, he was going to tear them all down. 3 weeks later, Rebecca was scrubbing floors at the Plaza Hotel when her supervisor found her. "Martinez, there's some kid here asking for you. Says it's urgent." Rebecca's heart skipped. She knew only one kid who would track her down at work. She found Maurice in the hotel lobby, looking small and determined in his school uniform. He was holding a large manila envelope and wearing the same stubborn expression she'd seen on his father's face. "Maurice, what are you doing here? How did you even find me?" "I asked Mrs. Rossi at the pizza place. She knows everything about everyone in the neighborhood." He held out the envelope. "I brought you something." Rebecca knelt down to his level, concerned. "Sweetheart, you can't just leave school and come find me. Your dad must be worried sick. He doesn't know I'm here, but he will soon." Maurice's eyes were bright with excitement. "Open it." With trembling hands, Rebecca opened the envelope. Inside were dozens of newspaper clippings, printed emails, and handwritten letters. The first clipping made her gasp. It was from the New York Times business section. The headline read, "Wellington CEO takes stand against social media bullying." Below it was a photo of James at a press conference looking serious and determined. "He's been fighting for you," Maurice explained eagerly. "Every day for 3 weeks. Read it." Rebecca read the article with growing amazement. In an unprecedented move, billionaire CEO James Wellington III held a press conference yesterday to address recent media speculation about his personal life. The woman in question is Rebecca Martinez, and she is one of the most extraordinary people I have ever met, Wellington stated. She saved my son's life, and more importantly, she saved mine. The suggestion that she is anything other than honorable is not only false, it's offensive to anyone who has ever worked hard to build a better life for themselves and their family. There's more, Maurice said, bouncing on his toes. Keep reading. The next clipping was from page 6 with the headline, Wellington Air Defends Mystery Woman. This article detailed how James had personally called every major newspaper and magazine that had run negative stories about Rebecca, demanding retractions and threatening legal action. He sued 3 magazines, Maurice said proudly. And he donated $1 million to a scholarship fund for working mothers who want to go to college. He said it was in your honor. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. Maurice. But wait, there's more. He pulled out a letter with the letterhead of Columbia University. He called your old school and found out about your scholarship. The one you gave up to take care of your mom. He's reinstating it. Full ride starting next semester if you want it. Rebecca couldn't speak. She was crying too hard. And this one's my favorite, Maurice continued, pulling out a handwritten letter. He wrote to Mrs. Henderson, you know, the mean lady from the science fair. He told her that if she ever spoke about you disrespectfully again, he'd make sure her husband never got another contract with Wellington Industries. He did all this? Rebecca whispered. Every day. He's been like a man on a mission. He even learned how to make paper airplanes so he could understand my project better. Maurice's voice dropped to a whisper. He misses you, Becca. We both do. I miss you too, sweetheart. More than you know. So why don't you come home? Before Rebecca could answer, she heard a familiar voice behind her. Because I was an idiot who hurt her. She turned to see James walking across the hotel lobby, looking nervous and hopeful, and absolutely devastated all at once. He was carrying a dozen red roses and what appeared to be a stack of papers. Dad, Maurice ran to him. You came. Of course I came. When your teacher called to say you'd climbed out the bathroom window, I knew exactly where you'd gone. James hugged his son tightly, then looked at Rebecca. Hello, Rebecca. Hello, James. She stood up slowly, very aware that she was in her work uniform, surrounded by the chaos of a hotel lobby. I see you've been busy. I've been trying to fix the biggest mistake of my life. He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm hoping you'll give me a chance to explain. You don't need to explain. Maurice showed me the articles. The articles are just the beginning. James held out the stack of papers. This is a formal apology letter to every person who made you feel unwelcome that day at the science fair. This is a resignation letter from the board of the country club that refused to let you attend their charity gala as my date. And this, he pulled out a single sheet of paper, is a job offer. A job offer? Head of Community Outreach for the Wellington Foundation. Full benefits, 6-figure salary, and your own office. You'd be in charge of our scholarship programs and family support initiatives. Rebecca stared at the paper. James, I can't accept this. Why not? Because I don't want you to love me because you feel guilty. I don't want you to hire me because you think you owe me something. James handed the roses to Maurice and took both of her hands in his. Then how about this? He dropped to one knee right there in the middle of the Plaza Hotel lobby. Rebecca Martinez, I love you. Not because you saved my son's life, not because you're kind or smart or beautiful, although you're all of those things. I love you because you made me remember what it feels like to be alive. Rebecca's breath caught. James, what are you doing? I'm being brave. Finally. He pulled out a small velvet box. I'm not asking you to marry me, not yet. I know we have things to work out, trust to rebuild. But I'm asking you to give us a chance, to come home, to be part of our family. It's not an engagement ring, Maurice added helpfully. It's a promise ring. Dad and I picked it out together. A promise ring? Rebecca laughed through her tears. A promise that I will never choose fear over love again, James said seriously. A promise that I will fight for us every day, no matter what anyone says or thinks. A promise that you will always have a place in our family, whether you're our housekeeper, our community outreach director, or just the woman who makes us both smile. Rebecca looked around the lobby. A crowd had gathered. People were taking pictures with their phones, and she could see hotel employees whispering excitedly. "James, there are people watching. Let them watch. Let them see that James Wellington III is completely, hopelessly, publicly in love with Rebecca Martinez." He squeezed her hands. "I spent years hiding from the world. I'm done hiding. But what about the social pressure? The newspapers, the judgment? They can all go to hell." James's voice was firm. "You know what I learned these past 3 weeks? I'd rather be judged for loving you than respected for being alone." Maurice stepped forward. "Plus, we're really good at defending you now. Dad's gotten scary good at it." "Is that true?" Rebecca asked, looking at James. "Ask Mrs. Henderson. She crosses the street when she sees me coming." Despite everything, Rebecca burst into laughter. "You didn't." "I absolutely did. Nobody talks about my family that way." "Your family, if you'll have us." James's voice was soft, vulnerable. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, but I'm asking for a second chance to prove that we're worth fighting for." Rebecca looked at the two most important people in her life, the man who'd learned to be brave and the boy who'd taught him how, and realized that everything she'd ever wanted was right here. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay?" "Yes. Okay to the promise ring. Okay to coming home. Okay to being part of your family." James slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood up and kissed her right there in front of everyone. It was soft and sweet and full of promise. "Yes," Maurice cheered, jumping up and down. "We're a family again." The crowd around them applauded, and Rebecca realized that for the first time in her life, she didn't care who was watching. She was exactly where she belonged. 6 months later, Rebecca stood in the same hotel lobby, but everything had changed. She was wearing a designer dress, her hair was professionally styled, and she was holding a clipboard instead of a mop. "The Wellington Foundation Charity Gala is ready to begin," her assistant informed her. "All the scholarship recipients are here, and the silent auction is already exceeding projections." "Excellent. Thank you, Maria." Rebecca had discovered that she was exceptionally good at her new job. Turns out understanding what it felt like to need help made her excellent at providing it. The foundation had already awarded scholarships to 50 single mothers, funded 3 community centers, and established a mentorship program for children who'd lost parents. "Becca," Maurice ran up to her, looking handsome in his tiny tuxedo. "Dad's looking for you. He says it's time for your speech." "How do I look?" she asked, smoothing her dress nervously. "Like a princess," Maurice said seriously. "But not the kind who needs saving. The kind who does the saving. That's my boy." She kissed his forehead. "Ready to go charm some donors?" "Always." They walked into the ballroom together, where James was waiting by the podium. He looked impossibly handsome in his tuxedo, and when he saw her, his face lit up with the smile she'd fallen in love with. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC announced, "please welcome the head of the Wellington Foundation, Ms. Rebecca Martinez." As Rebecca stepped up to the podium, she looked out at the crowd of New York's elite, the same people who'd once judged her, now hanging on her every word. But her eyes found James and Maurice in the front row, and suddenly she wasn't nervous anymore. "A year ago," she began, "I was cleaning floors and taking care of other people's children, wondering if I'd ever be more than just someone who worked in the background. Tonight I'm here to tell you that sometimes the most extraordinary things happen when we stop trying to fit into someone else's idea of who we should be and start embracing who we really are." She talked about second chances, about the power of education, about the importance of supporting each other. But mostly she talked about love, the kind that transforms lives, the kind that's worth fighting for, the kind that makes you brave. When she finished, the standing ovation was thunderous. But all she saw was James, looking at her with so much pride and love that she thought her heart might burst. Later, as the evening wound down, the 3 of them sat together on the hotel's rooftop terrace. looking out over the city lights. "Best gala ever," Maurice declared, his bow tie undone and his hair messy from dancing. "I agree," James said, his arm around Rebecca's shoulders. "You were incredible tonight." "We were incredible," Rebecca corrected. "All of us." "So," Maurice said casually, "when are you two getting married?" "Maurice," Rebecca laughed. "What? I'm just asking. I want to know if I need to start working on my best man speech." James and Rebecca looked at each other, and she saw the question in his eyes. "Soon," she said softly. "Very soon." "Good," Maurice said, satisfied. "Because I've got some really great ideas for the wedding reception. Did you know that paper airplanes make excellent decorations?" As they laughed together under the stars, Rebecca realized that fairy tales weren't just for children. Sometimes, if you were brave enough to believe in them, they came true. And sometimes, they started with a plane crash and ended with a family. 1 year later, the New York Times Society page featured a different kind of headline. "Wellington CEO marries Foundation Director in Intimate Central Park Ceremony." The photo showed James and Rebecca dancing at their wedding reception, while Maurice, now 8 and still the smartest kid in New York, flew paper airplanes with the other children. The article mentioned that instead of wedding gifts, the couple had asked for donations to the Wellington Foundation Scholarship Fund, which had now helped over 500 families. But the best part of the article was the quote from the groom. "I used to think love was a risk I couldn't afford to take. Now I know it's the only risk worth taking." Mrs. Rossi from Tony's Pizzeria catered the reception, and everyone agreed it was the most beautiful wedding they'd ever seen. The end.